I was engaged to Mason when we were still in our mother's wombs. Growing up, we were the model childhood sweethearts in the steel factory compound. I had thought that we could live a happy life together. However, I never expected that after the news of my sister's death came, he committed suicide. Bearing the grief, I went to see him for the last time. To my surprise, I saw that he was tightly clutching a photo of my sister in his hand. On the back of the photo, it was written, "The love of my life." It turned out that the youthful affection I had thought I had was just a joke. When I opened my eyes again, I was reborn. This time, I chose Oscar, Mason's eldest brother, who was a regimental commander in the army. Let Mason and my dear sister have the great love of staying together through life and death. What are you standing there in a daze for, sis? Mason and the others are here. Mona pushed my hand. I came to my senses and looked in the direction she was pointing. It was the 4 members of the Mason family. Mason's father and mother were carrying big and small bags, looking cheerful. Mason was staring intently at Mona, and Mason's eldest brother Oscar was following at the back, looking as if it had nothing to do with him. Looking at the scene in front of me, I knew that I had been reborn and returned to the day when the Mason family came to visit in advance. Recollecting my past life, Mason and I got engaged smoothly on this day. I had thought it was the beginning of my happy life, but little did I know that it was actually the start of a chapter of misery. After marriage, Mason had always been gloomy. I just thought that he hadn't adapted to the change in his status. But as time went by, he always had a cold face towards me. From not coming home once in a while to never coming home every day, it made me feel as if I had lost my husband even though I was married, like a widow in name only. I always thought that he still cared about me, even though we had never consummated our marriage. So I just thought that I only needed to work harder. Therefore, I kept trying to please him, cooking the dishes he liked, wearing the dresses he liked. However, instead of waiting for our relationship to improve, I first received the news of Mona's death. At the same time, Mason also went missing. I and the members of the Mason family searched for him all night. Finally, we found him by Mona's grave. It was too late. He had already lost all signs of life. Bearing the grief, I arranged his funeral affairs. To my surprise, I found that he was tightly clutching a photo in his hand. The person in the photo was Mona, my sister. On the back, it was written, "The love of my life." Only then did I finally realize that the childhood sweethearts relationship I had thought I had was just a joke. Mason had never loved me from the beginning to the end. All along, he had only had Mona in his heart. Marrying me was just because he couldn't go against the wishes of his father and mother. That's why he was so cold to me. That's also why he got drunk on Mona's wedding day. At that time, I just thought that he was happy for his sister who had grown up with him. It turned out that I was the joke. Chapter 2. Recalling those past events, every time Mason saw Mona, he would smile especially brightly, and he would do his best to satisfy all of Mona's requests. I had thought that he was doting on Mona like a sister. It turned out that it was actually his true feelings showing. Fortunately, everything could start anew. Thinking of this, I spoke up in advance. Mason and I have been like brothers since we were young, and the arranged childhood engagement didn't necessarily mean it had to be between the two of us. Brothers. Hearing my words, Mason was obviously stunned for a moment. He was clearly surprised. Just as he was about to speak, I said again, "Uncle, Auntie, Mom, Dad, I want to marry brother Oscar." My parents and Mason's father and mother had arranged the childhood engagement between our two families before I was even born. I was smart and clever from birth. I could get the first place in every subject when I was at school. After graduating from high school, I was admitted to university. In the 1980s, college students were highly sought after. And after graduating from university, I was also admitted to the position of office publicity in the steel factory, without taking up the quota for my parents' early retirement. So although it was an arranged childhood engagement, the 2 elders of the Mason family were very satisfied with me. In my past life, they also finalized the marriage between Mason and me. In my past life, I was also very satisfied with the marriage between Mason and me. I got married with full of joy. However, now it seems that I just jumped into a pit of fire. So in this new life, I will never follow the old path of my past life. Then again, Oscar is Mason's eldest brother. When we were young, he also took care of us like a big brother. But as he joined the army, our relationship gradually became estranged. Including in my past life, he was always in the army, and he sacrificed himself on a mission 1 year after I married Mason. Since I was going to get married anyway, he was undoubtedly a good choice. After hearing my reasons, Mason's father and mother looked quite moved. They turned to look at Oscar. Oscar, what do you think? Oscar frowned tightly and fell into deep thought. Sister, don't make things difficult for brother Oscar. He doesn't want to marry you at all. Mona said indignantly, with a hint of schadenfreude. I'm willing. Just now I was thinking that Kiki is so excellent. It would be a pity if she marries me. Hearing Oscar's words, I was a bit stunned. The elders, however, were all beaming with joy. Then it's settled. Since Oscar is on vacation at home these days, let's hold the wedding first. After he goes back to the army to submit the marriage report, we'll get the marriage certificates for the 2 kids. Mason's father made the final decision on our marriage. At this time, Mason walked up to me and whispered, Kiki, what's going on? Didn't we grow up together since we were young? Didn't you always say you wanted to marry me? You actually told my parents that you regarded me as a brother. Hearing this, I laughed. Aren't I doing him and Mona a favor? Who is he putting on this act for? However, in this life, I really want to see if, without me in the way, he and Mona can live together until old age. And after knowing the real cause of Mona's death, will he still love her as always? Chapter 3. The elders were very efficient. Since Oscar's vacation this time was short, they arranged the wedding banquet in just 2 days. Although the time was short, nothing was lacking. The 3 wheels and 1 sound, bicycle, sewing machine, wristwatch, and radio, were brought in, and everyone in the steel factory was extremely envious. Although the living conditions are better now, there aren't many people who can use the 3 wheels and 1 sound as betrothal gifts. It's still Kiki girl who has a good life. She has a good job herself, and the man she marries is also excellent. Sure. I heard he's a regimental commander in the army. She'll surely be a proper lady of a leader in the future. There was a lively discussion going on outside. However, Mona's face was getting paler and paler, with a trace of jealousy flashing in her eyes. Sister, this watch is really beautiful. I wish I could have one too. Mona's pitiful words interrupted my thoughts. It was the same in my past life. Whenever she heard others complimenting me, she would throw a tantrum. If I had something, she had to have it too. As long as it was within my ability, I would try my best to satisfy her demands. I had always thought it was just the way a little girl behaved, but now I won't be so silly anymore, right? Brother Oscar is so nice. I heard he specially prepared all these. I pretended not to understand and said with a sweet look on my face, Sister, are you deliberately marrying brother Oscar just to annoy brother Mason? Mona glanced at the door and asked, feigning innocence. Silly girl, how could you think like that? Brother Oscar is so excellent. It's quite normal to like him. Unlike Mason, who acts like a hot-headed kid. I don't know how happy I am to be able to marry brother Oscar. I said with a shy look on my face. However, Mona's face was looking uglier and uglier. Don't think that only she saw the shadow by the door. She wants to drive a wedge between me and Oscar's relationship now. Unfortunately, I won't be so muddled-headed just for the title of a good sister anymore. Kiki, I've come to take you home. The door was pushed open. Oscar was wearing a green military uniform, standing tall and straight. There was a suspicious blush on his bronze-colored face. Mason was following behind. After entering, he walked a few steps and stood beside Mona. Looking at her pale face, his eyes were full of concern. You don't look well. Are you feeling unwell? Do you want to take a rest? It's just their wedding. Don't tire yourself out. Brother Mason, I'm okay. I'm just a bit sad thinking that sister is going to get married. Mona twisted her fingers and bit her lip pitifully. Silly girl. Ignoring the inquiring looks of everyone present, Mason stroked Mona's head. The auspicious time has come. The bride is leaving now. It was Aunt Zhang from next door who broke the atmosphere. Since we hadn't got the marriage certificate yet, after the wedding, I still went back to the Kiki family. I was just waiting for the marriage report to be approved and get the certificate before officially moving into the Mason family. And Oscar also hurried back to the army the next day after the wedding. I also put them aside for the time being and focused all my attention on my work. In my past life, because I was worried about gains and losses, I didn't cherish my good job and had been marking time for many years. This time, I just want to seize my opportunities. Unexpectedly, a few days later, I actually received a letter from Oscar. There were only 2 simple words in it: wait for me. Along with it came his allowance remittance slip, which was a total of 158 yuan. In my past life, when I was married to Mason for 2 years, I had never seen a single cent of his salary. He was just an ordinary clerk in the purchasing department of the factory. His salary wasn't high but was decent enough, yet he never brought a single cent home. So now I could feel the weight of the remittance slip in my hand even more. Chapter 4. After thinking about it, I went out to buy a bunch of things and planned to cook something for him and send it over. It could be considered as returning a favor. After I was done, I carried big and small bags, along with the carefully packed remittance slip, and was ready to go to the Mason family. I wanted to see if they had anything to send over together. Also, I was going to give the remittance slip to Mason's father and mother. After all, we hadn't got the marriage certificate yet, so we weren't really a proper married couple. Knock knock knock. Kiki, what are you doing here? It was Mason who opened the door. He looked me up and down with a sleepy face and spoke impatiently. Why did you cook so much food? You might as well use this money to buy Mona a couple more clothes. Spicy chicken dices? Isn't this Mona's favorite? Did you save some for her? Then, as if he had thought of something, his eyes suddenly lit up. Never mind. Give me the things. I'll send them to Mona later. You'd better go back quickly if you have nothing to do. Seeing that I didn't say anything and just stood there quietly, he became even more impatient and said with a look of disgust, Really, as a sister, you don't know how to think about your sister at all. Then what does Mona need you as a sister for? As he said that, he tried to snatch the things from my hands. This is really an eye-opener, like a small knife cutting the buttocks. Slap. I slapped his hand hard. Looking at his hand, it turned red instantly. Get lost. If you want to eat, go buy it yourself. These are prepared for Oscar. What? Are you going to snatch the food that your sister-in-law prepared for your elder brother? I sneered with a fake smile. After saying that, without looking at his flushed and angry face, I walked straight into the house. After seeing Mason's father and mother and explaining the reason for my visit, the 2 old people were smiling so much that their eyes narrowed into slits. Finally, someone is taking care of Oscar. Good girl, keep the allowance. It belongs to you 2 as a young couple anyway. Mason's mother smiled and patted my hand. I lowered my head, touched my hot ears, and quickly made an excuse to go and send the things and took my leave. Soon, the days passed by with one letter after another between me and Oscar. Kiki, I'll be back in a week. When I received this letter, I was a bit flustered. That meant Oscar would be back in a couple of days. Looking at the yellowing blouse I was wearing, I decided to go to the Supply and Marketing Cooperative. When I arrived at the Supply and Marketing Cooperative, I went straight to the clothing counter. In these days, few people bought ready-made clothes. Most families bought fabric and made clothes by themselves. Brother Mason, these little leather shoes look so nice. I wish I could wear such nice little leather shoes too. Suddenly, a delicate voice rang out. Looking back, it was Mason and Mona. Chapter 5. Since Mona likes them, let's buy them. How could I be so shameless? Brother Mason, they cost 45 yuan. As Mason paid the money generously, Mona's voice became even more delicate. As far as I know, Mason's monthly salary is only 47 yuan now. He's really willing to spend on the person he loves. No wonder he never brought any money home in my past life. while Mona always dressed herself up nicely. So there was such a sucker. I didn't bother with them. In this life, I don't want to get involved in their lives. I just want to quietly watch and see if they can be happy for a lifetime without me. Sister, why are you here too? Have you got your salary? Unexpectedly, Mona saw me first. She walked a few steps towards me with a bag in her hand. No. Can't I just look? I replied stiffly. The reason I never had any savings wasn't that I spent a lot myself. It was that as soon as I got my salary, Mona would come and cuddle up to me, asking for this and that, thinking that she was my only sister, and if I didn't agree, my parents wouldn't give me a good look either. Said, "You're already a person who earns your own money. Why are you so stingy towards your sister who is still in school?" So all along, Mona has been dressed up brightly and beautifully, while I could only be considered clean and tidy. And seeing me appear at this counter, Mona was of course nervous. If I spent my salary, what would she buy with? "Hello, how much is this piece of clothing?" 17, the salesperson replied lazily. I touched the 15 yuan in my pocket and sighed. Forget it. I'll wait until I get my salary this month. Seeing my embarrassment, a trace of ridicule flashed in Mona's eyes. "Brother Mason, this piece of clothing matches the little leather shoes I just bought so well. Mona will save some money when she goes back and can come and buy it next time." Mona pulled Mason's arm and said coquettishly, "Buy it. If Mona likes it, we'll buy it now. Why wait for next time?" As he said that, he took out money from his pocket again to pay the bill. The salesperson immediately perked up and was ready to pack it. "Comrade, I'm still short of 4 yuan. Could you please keep it for us first? I'll bring the money back to you after I go home." Mason scratched his head, looking embarrassed. Mona's high and mighty look also turned into embarrassment. "Go away. If you can't afford it, don't pretend to be a big shot. Go and cool off somewhere." The salesperson shooed them away. The two of them changed their expressions again and again. "Brother Mason, it doesn't matter. I'm already very happy with these little leather shoes," Mona said with an understanding look. Hearing this, Mason was even more touched. "Sister, let's go home. Anyway, you can't afford it either. When we get home, I'll get you 2 of my clothes to wear." As she said that, Mona wanted to hold my hand. "Do you like this shirt?" A clear voice rang out from behind. "Brother, why are you back?" Mason looked at the place behind me in surprise. I didn't react for a moment, and Oscar had already walked up to me and asked the salesperson to wrap up the piece of clothing I had taken a fancy to. Looking at the wad of money he took out from his pocket, Mona's eyes widened. "What else do you like? Since we're here, let's buy them all together." "Why are you here?" "I went to your house to look for you. Kiki's father said you had come to the supply and marketing cooperative. I wanted to see you earlier, so I came looking for you." Oscar said seriously. "Brother, could you lend me some money? I want to buy something for Mona." Before I could reply, Mason stepped forward a little embarrassedly. "No. My money is for buying things for Kiki." After saying that, he no longer looked at them, took my hand and walked to the shoe counter, leaving Mason with a livid face and Mona with a jealous and resentful look. Chapter 6. Okay, we've finished buying things. Now comes the most important thing. I looked at Oscar in confusion. "Let's go and get the marriage certificate." Oscar patted my head, just like I would pet the big yellow dog next door. After getting the marriage certificate and going back home, I went into the room to put things away, and Oscar followed me in. "Kiki, although our marriage was a bit of a surprise to me, but when you said you wanted to marry me, I was actually a bit excited. Now I can finally say this. I'm very happy to have married you. And please rest assured, I swear by this military uniform that if I ever let you down, let me." Before he could finish, I covered his mouth. I don't want to know what will happen in the future, but at this moment, I was undoubtedly moved. So it's better to try to believe. It would be great if we could grow old together. Even if I'm blind again in the future, I believe I can live a good life on my own. Moreover, the top priority should be to help Oscar get through the crisis 1 year later. Whether as a husband or a qualified soldier, I don't want him to sacrifice like that. I believe you. I also hope that for me and for our parents, you can take good care of yourself. No matter when, you should always remember that there are people waiting for you to come back at home. I looked into his eyes seriously and said this. But I blushed under his increasingly eager gaze. He tentatively put his arm around me, and the temperature in the room was rising continuously. Just as I was about to close my eyes, "Big girl, Oscar, come out and eat," my mother shouted outside. Instantly, I pushed him away, rubbed my face and hurried out of the door. Unexpectedly, I stumbled and almost fell, and there was a low laugh from behind. "You girl, what are you doing in such a hurry? Look at your red face. Is it that hot?" My mother muttered as she walked past me with the dishes. Unexpectedly, besides Mona, Mason was also there. "Mona, this is what you like to eat. Have some more?" At the dinner table, Mason was gently picking food for Mona with a tender look on his face. "Thank you, Brother Mason. You have some more too." After saying that, Mona rolled her eyes twice and looked at Oscar. "Brother Oscar, have a piece of fish. You usually work hard to defend the country. I admire you soldiers the most." Mona cupped her face with both hands, with a sweet smile and a sugary voice. Oscar didn't react much, but Mason's face darkened. "Dear, I don't like fish. I'll trouble you to deal with it for me. What else do you want to eat? I'll pick it for you." After saying that, he picked up the piece of fish that Mona had picked for him and put it into my bowl, and ate on his own, ignoring her. I lowered my head, held back my laughter and tried to focus on eating. Looking at the wonderful expressions on those two people's faces, the food in my mouth tasted even better. "Mom, the dishes you cooked today are really delicious." I casually praised my mother's cooking skills. After the meal, Oscar helped me carry the dishes and went to the kitchen together. Mona actually helped carry them too, which was rare. You know, in 2 lifetimes, she had never done any housework at home. Her hands were even fair and tender. However, when walking to the door, Mona slipped and fell towards Oscar. Looking at Oscar who jumped 2 meters away, and Mona who fell flat on the ground, we couldn't help but look at each other in astonishment. Mason quickly rushed forward, picked up Mona and put her on the stool. At this moment, Mona's eyes were a bit red, with tears in her eyes, and she said with a wronged look, "Brother Oscar, do you dislike me so much? You didn't even want to help me when I was about to fall." Oscar was a bit embarrassed for once. I'm used to roughhousing during training in the army. I didn't react for a moment. "But you too, you're such a big person already, and you can't even walk steadily." It would have been okay if he hadn't explained. With this explanation, Mona was completely angry and cried out. "What did I say wrong?" Oscar asked me in confusion. If it weren't for the smile in his eyes, I would almost believe that he was really a big, dumb guy. Chapter 7. After helping my mother wash the dishes and take out the garbage, I thought of going to call Oscar to go back to the Mason family together. Since we got the marriage certificate today, it's not appropriate for me to stay at my mother's house anymore. "Mona, why have you been talking to Big Brother all day? You've even looked at him more times than you've looked at me." A questioning voice came from the alley. "Brother Mason, the person Mona cares about the most is you. I just asked a couple more questions today because I was thinking that sister is going to get married. I wanted to help see if he's reliable. Not everyone is as caring as Brother Mason." Mona's voice was so soft and charming that it seemed as if water could drip from it. "Mona, could you be my girlfriend? Don't worry, I'll be responsible for you. But I'm still young. It doesn't matter. I'll wait for you. But could you let Brother Mason hug you for now?" After that, no one spoke anymore, and only an ambiguous sound came from the alley. Unexpectedly, my ex-husband and my sister were quite unrestrained. After returning to the Mason family, Oscar handed me a small box. "Kiki, this is all my savings since I joined the army. I'll also send you my monthly allowance in the future. Don't be reluctant to spend it. If there's anything you want to buy, don't be like today. I earn money for my wife to spend." Under the dim yellow candlelight, he was wearing a green military shirt with the collar slightly open and the cuffs rolled up to the middle of his arms, revealing his wheat-colored skin. He looked very serious. "Okay. Facing him like this, I couldn't say anything else. I blushed shyly and nodded. Unexpectedly, he hugged me all of a sudden. Now there's no one to disturb us. Today is our wedding night. Let's go to bed early. The next day, I arrived at the office just in time. Oh, look at this married woman. She's really different. Look at how rosy Kiki's complexion is. Sister Zhang, the office accountant, said with a teasing smile. Hearing this, the others also joined in the fun one after another. I blushed and didn't dare to speak. If I did, these elder sisters would never stop. Married women dare to make all kinds of jokes. Sure enough, after a while, Sister Zhang came out to stop them. As the eldest sister in the office, her words still carried a lot of weight. Okay. Stop it. Get to work. I don't know what's going on recently. Reconciling these accounts is giving me such a headache. I'm getting old, isn't it? The invoices submitted by the purchasing department are all in a mess. It always takes me a long time to sort them out. Sister Lu, another accountant, chimed in. As a member of the publicity department, I didn't have much to do with the accounts. I quietly did my own work. Oscar was coming to pick me up from work today, so I couldn't be late. In the following few days, Oscar and I were even more inseparable. Mason's father and mother were happy to see that we got along so well. It would be better if they didn't look at my stomach with a smile every morning when I got up. As for Mason, he was nowhere to be seen all day long. As for my sister, on the few occasions I saw her on the way, she was wearing different clothes and shoes each time. I don't know how she managed to do that since she still hadn't found a job yet. But it didn't have much to do with me. I was busy with work promotions and also preparing dry food for Oscar to take back to the army. Chapter 8. After Oscar left, my life returned to the routine of going between two places. There was a vacancy for a deputy director in the factory recently. I was so busy every day that my feet hardly touched the ground, just to perform well and get this position. Fortunately, all the hard work paid off. Amidst the congratulations, I successfully became the deputy director of the office in the steel factory. Look, a person is in high spirits when good things happen. Deputy Director Kiki has put on quite a bit of weight recently. Early in the morning, it was still Sister Zhang who teased me. Really? Maybe I've been eating too much recently. It's all because my mother-in-law's cooking is so delicious. I touched my stomach. There did seem to be a bit of a bulge. I said helplessly, "Could it be that you're pregnant?" "Pregnant with what?" Sister Zhang poked my forehead with her finger, looking exasperated. "Child, are you pregnant?" Hearing this, I was stunned. Oscar had been back in the army for almost 3 months. During this time, I was so busy with work that it seemed my period hadn't come for a long time indeed. "Sister Zhang, if the director is looking for me, please tell him for me. I'm going to the hospital." Without waiting for an answer, I grabbed my cloth bag and rushed out of the door. Sure enough, I was indeed pregnant. It had only been a few days, and I wasn't prepared at all. I was feeling dizzy at the moment. After coming out of the hospital, I immediately went to the post office to send a telegram to tell Oscar the news, and also informed Mason's father and mother. The two old people were extremely excited, muttering that the Mason family would have an heir. "Mom and Dad, don't cook for me today. I'm going back to my parents' house to tell them this news." Sure. I'll boil 2 eggs for you and leave them on the stove for you to eat when you come back. You need to nourish yourself." Mason's mother was beaming with joy. Okay. When I returned to the Kiki family, unexpectedly, the first person I saw was Mona. She was wearing a small white dress with floral patterns, a pair of calfskin shoes on her feet, and she even had a watch and a gold chain on her wrist, and a shiny hairpin in her hair. "Sister, look. Mason bought these for me from Shanghai. He also said he would take me with him on his next business trip." Mona stretched out her hand in front of me, showing off. "Look at you. You've been wearing this dress for so long. Oscar doesn't even know to buy you new ones. Later, you can take 2 pieces from me. Mason bought them for me, but I don't like them after wearing them twice." She pursed her lips and looked disdainful. I looked Mona up and down and smiled. With Mason's meager monthly salary, Mona was dressed in gold and silver. It seemed that he was really going all out in this life. No need. I just came back to tell my parents that I'm pregnant. Since they're not here, I'll leave first. After saying that, I left. I had to go back and calculate Oscar's savings. Chapter 9. Unexpectedly, just as I walked to the entrance of the alley, Aunt Lou, the neighbor, grabbed my hand and shouted, "Oscar's wife, something bad has happened. Mason was taken away by the inspectors. They said he illegally occupied state property." Hearing this, I was startled. I had only thought that he took things from home. I never expected that he would be so bold as to embezzle state assets. This is a serious crime. Without even thanking Aunt Lou, I ran towards home. The joyful atmosphere before going out was gone. My father-in-law was nowhere to be seen. Only my mother-in-law was there, crying as she rummaged through the boxes and cupboards. Seeing me come in, my mother-in-law finally couldn't hold back. "Kiki, why is Mason such a muddled-headed child? Our family's conditions are not bad. He doesn't lack food or drink. Why did he do such a despicable thing?" In these days, the interests of the state are above everything. Whoever dares to violate state property will be condemned by everyone. In the previous years of severe crackdowns, people would even be executed. Thinking about Mona's showing off and Sister Zhang's remarks about the accounts not matching up before, I vaguely understood something. Soon, my father-in-law, who had gone out to inquire about the news, came back, looking dejected. I asked the old factory director. That good-for-nothing debt collector used 5,000 yuan from the factory's purchasing production line. When I asked him where he used it, he wouldn't say. The old factory director said that if he could pay back the money, it would be okay. He would help suppress this matter. If he couldn't pay it back, he would have to go to jail. As he said this, he wiped his face, and his whole body hunched over, looking as if he had aged 10 years all of a sudden. Hearing the amount, I was shocked. The average salary now is only 600 yuan a year, and he embezzled 5,000 yuan. Let's not save him. Teach him a lesson. If he embezzles public funds now, he might even commit murder and arson in the future. Old man, he's your own son. We have to save him no matter what. Otherwise, his life will be ruined. The mother-in-law cried and pounded the father-in-law twice. Chapter 10. Anyway, the Mason family only has 2 sons. Although he said some harsh words, the father-in-law wouldn't really abandon his son. In the following days, the 2 old people sold all the gold bracelets and other things they had saved up at home. They took out their pension money and even their coffin money, and finally managed to scrape together 5,000 yuan. In the meantime, I tried to offer Oscar savings. Although I hated Mason, looking at the 2 old people's gray hair, I couldn't bear to do it. But they refused to accept it no matter what I said. It's our fault for not teaching him well. You and Oscar should live a good life. Our family can't be dragged down by him completely, the father-in-law said with a sigh. Fortunately, the Mason family was still quite well off. They quickly raised the money and handed it in. Originally, Mason could have been released after the money was paid. However, to teach him a lesson, the father-in-law was cruel enough to let the inspectors keep Mason in custody for 2 months and forbade the mother-in-law to visit him. I just don't know if Mason could understand his parents' painstaking efforts. I also don't know if Mona could still wait for him to come out. Slow down, slow down. You're 5 months pregnant now. You have to be careful. Your belly is so big. When I got home, Mason's mother took my bag and helped me sit on the chair. Mom, why are you so happy today? Today Mason is going to be released. I went to buy a whole table of his favorite dishes early in the morning. He must have suffered a lot in there. He needs to nourish himself well. The mother-in-law answered cheerfully while cooking. However, until the food was almost cold, there was still no sign of Mason. Kiki, you eat first. Pregnant women can't go hungry. We'll wait a little longer for that unfilial son, the mother-in-law said as she handed me the chopsticks and bowl. Something bad has happened. Something bad has happened. Your Mason got into a fight with the factory director's son outside. Aunt Lou shouted breathlessly at the entrance of the courtyard. Smash! The bowl in the mother-in-law's hand fell to the ground and broke. When we arrived at the scene, Mason was holding a bloody knife, looking crazy. Passers-by didn't dare to approach him. One person lying on the ground was the factory director's son, with blood gushing out of his stomach continuously. The other one was even covered in blood, crying and howling non-stop. Seeing me coming, she shouted, "Sister, save me! Save me!" It was Mona. In her past life, she was hacked to death by her husband because of her affair. In this life, after going through so many twists and turns, she still ended up like this. I don't know what Mason was feeling at this moment. Soon, the doctors came and took the two away, and the police also came to take Mason away. Chapter 11 Later, after the police investigation, it was found out that on that day, Mason had just been released from prison. He was thinking about Mona wholeheartedly, so he didn't even go home but went to look for her directly. However, he saw her holding the factory director's son Bob's hand sweetly. The two walked and stopped, and then went to the cinema. Seeing them kissing in the cinema, Mason gradually lost his sanity. But thinking about the taste of prison, he finally held back and still didn't give up following them. But after hearing their conversation, he completely went crazy. He picked up a small knife from a roadside fruit stand and stabbed Bob. Mona, who was trying to escape, was also grabbed by her hair brutally by him. He slashed her face with the knife again and again, ignoring Mona's crying and begging for mercy, and even cursing her as a slut. The reason for this was that Bob asked Mona, "I heard that you were very close to that jailed kid before. Some people even said that there was something fishy between you two." And Mona denied it resolutely. "How could it be? I only got to know Mason because my sister married into their family. I don't like a man like him who is good for nothing and has even been to jail. In the past, he was always pestering me shamelessly, and I couldn't even drive him away. It was so annoying. I'd say it's good that he was locked up. Finally, no one is bothering me. And I like a gentleman like you, Bob." As she said that, Mona hugged Bob's arm shyly, and Bob chuckled and patted Mona on the butt. Thinking about everything he had done for Mona and looking at the coquettish woman in front of him, Mason completely lost his mind, and that's how the later incident happened. This time, the in-laws didn't say they would save him again. "Let's just consider that we only had one son in this life." After saying this, the father-in-law helped the mother-in-law, and the two of them staggered into the room. Sure enough, they didn't ask about Mason's affairs anymore. Soon, the judgment on Mason came down. Although Bob was seriously injured, he didn't die. Mona was stabbed in the uterus and lost her fertility. Her face was also completely disfigured. Mason was finally sentenced to 20 years in prison. Because this incident caused a big stir, to enable the two old people to live their remaining years in peace, Oscar applied for us to accompany the army and was going to take us to the army. Before going to the army, I went to the prison. Kiki, you've finally come to see me. I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? I was blinded by that vicious woman Mona. Wait for me. After I get out, will you divorce my brother and marry me? Mason's eyes were sunken, his face was full of stubble, and he said anxiously, "Mason, do you know? In this new life, my biggest wish is to have nothing to do with you. I'm just here to tell you that Oscar and I will soon move away from this city. I hope you won't come looking for us after you get out." I'm wrong, Kiki. Ignoring the crazy wailing behind me, I left the prison. Not long after we arrived at the army, we received the news that Mason had committed suicide in prison. His last words were only 3 words, "I'm sorry." Hearing the news, the in-laws cried twice and then forced themselves to cheer up because the baby in my belly couldn't wait to be born. 20 years later, both the in-laws and my own parents had passed away. Oscar was promoted to division commander. Perhaps it was the butterfly effect. He who was supposed to die early in his past life hardly even had a cold in this life. As for me, I caught the opportunity of the reform and opening up, seized the opportunity, and became a business tycoon. Our 2 children were also about to graduate from university. Yes, no one expected that the baby I was carrying back then was actually a boy and a girl, a pair of twins. My husband and I loved each other, and our children were filial. There were no regrets in my life. However, when I was invited back to the county town to invest, I met my sister, Mona. At this time, her hair was gray, she was wearing a sweatshirt full of stains, and her face was covered with terrifying knife scars. She was constantly rummaging through the trash can. Soon, she picked up the leftover steamed buns in the trash can and stuffed them into her mouth frantically, not even slowing down when she was choking and her eyes were rolling back. It made people wonder if that delicate girl in the white dress had ever really existed. General Manager Kiki, this way please. The staff's words interrupted my thoughts. Let's go. Don't keep the leaders waiting for too long. I smiled and followed the receptionist towards the hotel. All the past is like yesterday's death, all the future is like today's rebirth. The end.